We are excited for our keynote speaker today, Chris Barton. So let's roll the video.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. It's going to be really hard to live up to the energy of that video, I have to say. But let me ask, who here uses Shazam? Oh, wow. That's a lot of Shazam users. Awesome. Well, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a crazy idea for something that's impossible? Like a time machine. A time machine so you can go back in time and be the first person to buy front row tickets at that Coldplay concert, right? Or here's one that I've often wanted is an app that you can use when you're doing your laundry and it finds the missing sock, right? An idea for something that's impossible, right? Well, I had an idea for something that was impossible. I thought, gosh, when I'm out and about, I hear songs. I wish I could just pull out my mobile phone and it would just figure out what the song is. That'd be such a cool thing. And I would use it everywhere. I'd use it driving in my car, listening to the radio. I would use it in a bar, a club, a cafe, a movie theater, even in a little grocery store. Anywhere I heard a cool song, I thought, that'd be such a cool thing. Okay, that was my idea. But that didn't exist, and I'm non-technical. So I went and I met with these types of experts that develop audio signal processing technologies. These are PhDs in electrical engineering. I went to places like Stanford, where they have a group called the Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. I went to MIT Media Lab. I went to UC Berkeley. I even went to Xerox PARC and talked to the audio signal processing PhD there. And I met all these people and I said, I want to create a startup company that identifies song on a mobile phone. Can you please build that technology for me? And they said, there is no technology that can do that, and we have no idea how to create it. See, there was technology at the time that could do a much easier thing, and what it could do is it could identify songs played on the radio. But that's easy because there's no background noises like people talking. You just have clean signals of music coming in from each radio station. You only have to have a database of about 100,000 songs, all the songs played across all radio stations. And you only have to ping each radio station once per minute, right? So that was possible at the time, but to do it across tens of millions of songs with the background noise of people talking in bars and clubs and cafes, right? To do that, and to do it every single time someone Shazams a song, not just once per minute per radio station, to do that, well, that was impossible. So who here has never used Shazam? Never used Shazam? Okay. I see a potential new user here. What's your name?
Aaron.
Aaron?
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Aaron, okay. Nice to meet you, Aaron. Okay, so I'm going to show you Shazam. It's really, really easy. It's just an app you download for free. When you want to know the name of a song, you're out and about, you just push the button.
I guess I didn't know.
And there you go. I just heard it, and in a few seconds, I identified Busy Child by the Crystal Method. What do you think? You might download it?
Honestly? Sure.
Yeah. Yeah? Okay, awesome. Well, welcome to Shazam then.
What's your tech stack?
Sorry?
What's the tech stack that you use?
The tech stack?
Yeah.
The tech stack. Ooh, okay. I'm actually going to get to that in a second. Does that sound good? But yeah, and I'm also like can answer lots of questions at the end as well. So yeah, the tech stack. Wow, I wasn't prepared for this talk today. Aaron, just to make sure you don't forget about downloading Shazam, I'm going to give you a pair of Shazam socks. So it all looks pretty easy. It looks pretty simple, right? But it was not that simple to create. And the truth is that Shazam almost failed from the very beginning. And it's all my fault. See, my original idea for Shazam was not good enough. My original idea for Shazam was to use the technology that I already knew existed, right? This technology that pinged thousands of radio stations and checked what was playing on the radio all the time. I thought, oh, well, I'll tie into that service and I'll make a mobile phone service where you take out your mobile phone, you type in the radio station number you're listening to, and it tells you what's playing on that radio station, right? Now, it's a bit more of a clunky experience because you have to type the radio station number in each time, right? And also, it doesn't work if it's not the radio, right? So bars, clubs, cafes, movie theaters, right? Grocery stores, all these other places. But I still thought it was a pretty good idea. So that was my original idea for Shazam. Now imagine if that's what we had built. Imagine if we had gone and done a deal with that radio recognition company and tied into their service and created this mobile phone service that told you what was playing on the radio and raised our millions of dollars and worked around the clock to launch that. Do you think Shazam would still exist today? No, right? And how frustrating would that be, right? As we create businesses, how frustrating to create a business that just goes defunct, just goes bankrupt, becomes irrelevant. And that's what happened to the 6 companies that did do that. They're all gone. Now, before Shazam almost failed, I almost failed. Because I have dyslexia, and so I always struggled with academics. When I was in 5th grade, I was in this public school in San Diego, and then they had 60 kids in my grade, so they said, we're going to divide them into 2 classrooms, 2 different teachers. We're going to put the smart 30 kids in this classroom, and the not-so-smart 30 kids in this classroom. And that's where I ended up. I can still remember like sitting up back against the wall, hearing the kids in the smart classroom having so much fun with their special projects. Now, I worked really, really hard all the way through school, all the way through middle school, high school, and I got into college at UC Berkeley, civil engineering. Wow, I couldn't believe it. I was like so excited, but when I got there, everyone was so smart, everything was so difficult, and my dyslexia made it that much harder. And my first semester at UC Berkeley, I got a 1.7 grade point average, failing grades. And what they do is they write a letter, and they send it directly to your parents. And the letter says, we're going to kick your student out of college by next semester if they don't get their grades up. Now, it's one other thing that happened to me when I was a kid. I was in about 9th grade, and my biology teacher wrote a report card to my parents. And the report card said, your child is defiant. He questions my authority. He questions the things I teach. It was written in a negative tone, but, I've been thinking, maybe defiance is not such a bad thing. I mean, when I see my son being defiant, I think to myself, I think he has potential. I mean, I loved to make magic shows as a kid, and what is magic but defiance, right? Defiance of logic. So what if you can use defiance to create magic? Because that's what we did with Shazam, right? We created something so magical that it got 2 billion and hopefully 1 downloads. Something so magical that it became a verb. That's like every product creator's dream, you know? It's like you Google something if you want to know what it is, and then if you want to know the name of the song, you Shazam it. It became a verb. And then something that even Google didn't achieve, and that is that some people, like Aaron, will tell you they can remember the very first time they used Shazam. They're like, oh yeah, I remember that. Like, I remember it's like someone said, look, there's this new app, and you just push a button, and it just identifies the song, and it was such a magical experience, they literally remember that. So how do we do this? Now, my friends sometimes say to me, Chris, you founded Shazam. Why in the world would you ever give a speech? And this is the reason. See, I identified these different ways of thinking as entrepreneurs, future business leaders, different ways of thinking to bring new big things to life, big new innovations. These different ways of thinking that are not the ways that we think by default. They're not the way we think by default. But if you think this way, you can overcome all these big obstacles. And then I mapped these insights I had on different ways of thinking against my own experiences, because after starting Shazam 4 years later, while staying on the board of Shazam, I left the company in its struggling years, and actually staying on the board, I then joined Google in 2004 when it was a private company still. 6 months away from going public, Google just had 2,000 employees at the time. And I joined as their first mobile partnerships employee. In fact, recently, a few years ago, I got to go to Washington, D.C. and be the second witness on the Department of Justice versus Google antitrust trial. That was an interesting experience. And then being at Google, then I joined the Android team when there was just one Android phone in the world, the G1 on T-Mobile. And seeing the way these people thought, Larry and Sergey, the founders of Google, and all the creators, engineers, and product leaders at Google, the different ways they thought. And then after 8 years at Google, I went to Dropbox when it was just a 90-person startup, duct tape on the floors, covering the wires, and seeing the way they thought to bring these new big things to life. Build from basic truths, apply creative persistence, eliminate friction, and connect to emotions. So now imagine for a second that you work in a restaurant, okay? A really amazing restaurant, and you cook these delicious dishes. But now imagine you're the chef of the restaurant and you have to actually invent a delicious dish. How does the chef go about inventing delicious dishes? Who would have thought that a chef is actually using the same type of thinking as great innovators like Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, Leonardo da Vinci? I call it build from basic truth, his first principles thinking, because what a chef does when they want to invent a delicious dish is they start from the basic ingredients, the raw ingredients, and then they build up the possibilities for their new dish. And that's first principles thinking, or what I call build from basic truths. What you want to do when you're trying to come up with some big new idea for your startup company is you want to make sure that your starting point is just the core basic truths, that you're not making any assumptions. You have to question all the assumptions. Like, don't assume, oh, I need to tie into this existing service that monitors radio stations to build a music recognition business, which is what I originally assumed, and those 6 other companies did. Don't assume that if you have some new AI thing that, oh, I've got to build using one of the APIs that OpenAI has, right? Don't just start from what we already know. Question all the assumptions and break up your brand new idea. Now, I had this problem way back at that time where I would just hear songs once in a while, out and about. I'd go out maybe with my friends and I'd hear a cool song in the bar, and I'd be like, oh, I really like that song. And I wanted to know what it was, and the only thing I could do was to ask people, do you know what that song is? Do you know what that song is? And most of the time, people didn't know. But once in a while, they did know, and if they did, I actually wrote it down. I kept a list of my favorite songs. And when that list got long enough, I made this thing called a mixtape. You've heard of that? Yeah. Now, there was a second problem at the time. Whose parents had this phone? I figured it would be your parents, not you. That's how old it is. You know, everyone was getting their first mobile phones at this time. Everyone's walking around with their first mobile phone in their pocket, including me. And I realized there's only 3 things you can do with mobile phones. Right? At this point, by the way, I'm doing my MBA at Berkeley. I actually did graduate from Berkeley the first time, and a few years later went back and did my MBA. And I'm realizing, gosh, there's only 3 things you can do. You can make phone calls, you can send text messages, and you can play this game called Snake. Anyone heard of that? And that was it. That was all you could do with mobile phones. And I thought, gosh, if I can come up with another idea of something you can do with these mobile phones, just think of the possibilities. Millions of people walking around with mobile phones in their pockets wherever they go. That was way back in the spring of 1999 when someone named Sean Mullins was in the music charts.
Everything's gonna be alright. Rockabye.
Does anyone remember that song or they heard it? A couple people? Yeah. All right. It's still around. So, again, my original thinking, my traditional thinking, which we often do, is just to start by making assumptions. Oh, there's this technology that monitors thousands of radio stations so it can send royalties to the artists, and I'll tie into that and make this clunky service where you type in the radio station number on your mobile phone and it tells you what's playing on the radio. That was my original idea, okay. But at this point, I'm actually doing a semester abroad from the Berkeley MBA. I'm doing a semester abroad in London, at London Business School. And I'm living in Notting Hill, and I'm at home in my apartment in Notting Hill, laying in bed, thinking about my new startup I'm going to start, radio recognition, that I'm very excited about. And then I thought to myself, if I did build this business, this radio recognition business, so I did build it and I did launch it, what could someone do that would leapfrog me? What could someone do that would make me irrelevant? And that is such a great way to think when you're thinking about your startup idea, right? You might have some great new idea that you have, and then to ask yourself, if you did build that, what could someone else do that would leapfrog you and make you irrelevant, right? And that's the point where I was laying in bed, and I suddenly thought to myself, wait, what if you don't even need to know what's playing on the radio at all? What if you could just do it from the sound of the music coming from the speaker through the air to the microphone of the phone, despite the background noises of people talking, cars honking? What if you could just do that with some amazing technology? Because I thought if you did that, then you wouldn't have to type the radio station number in each time. That'd be great, a nice, beautiful user experience. And then it would work even if it's not the radio. That means it would work in bars, clubs, cafes, movie theaters, even in a grocery store. I was like, oh my gosh. That is what I want to do no matter how hard it is. That was the aha moment of Shazam. And that was in the fall of 1999 when Lenny Kravitz was in the charts.
I want to get away. I want to fly away. Yeah.
Some great songs from the time. So I didn't realize it, but I was building from basic truths, first principles thinking, because the 2 basic truths are, and these are truths, they're not assumptions. Every mobile phone has a microphone, clearly, right? Otherwise you wouldn't be able to talk into it. And all music is sound. It's audible. And from those 2 basic truths that are not assumptions, I'd come up with a new breakthrough idea, a new possibility. So when you think through as you're brainstorming your next startup, what's it going to be? How can you kind of question all the assumptions? Question all the assumptions and make sure that you're starting just from the basic truths to come up with your new breakthrough idea. I mean, maybe you want to do a new AI-related thing, and you're like, but what's really going to make me unique is I'm going to find some unique data set that no one else has access to and feed that data into the AI and come up with a delightful new product from that. Question the basic assumptions and build from the basic truths. Now, building from basic truths is actually a form of defiance because you're defying your own brain, right? See, our brains are actually not wired to think that way. Our brains are actually wired to think from what we know, to make assumptions, to think by analogy. That's how we're wired. You wouldn't have made it to this room today otherwise. You'd be like, oh, how do I know that's the right way to get to the campus? And how do I know it's safe to go through this doorway? And I mean, you can't constantly question every assumption. So our brains are not wired to think that way because it's not efficient. But when you want to come up with a big breakthrough idea, that's when you have to push yourself to question all the assumptions and build from basic truths. Okay, now imagine for a second that you are serving a life sentence in prison, okay? A life sentence in prison, and you come up with a big breakthrough idea. I am going to break out of prison. Is that one idea enough to get you out. Well, obviously that one idea is not going to get you out, right? Because, well, how are you going to escape from prison? I'm going to make a hole in the wall of my cell. Oh, how are you going to make a hole in the wall of your cell? Oh, I'm going to steal a pickaxe from the work shed when the guard's not looking. So you have to come up with all these ideas, right? Creative ideas. I call it creative persistence, right? And then how are you going to make sure that no one notices this pickaxe that you have in your cell? How are you going to make sure that no one notices the hole that you're building in the wall of your cell, right? So you've got to come up with creative ideas for where's it going to go when you go out that hole in the wall? Will it take you out of the prison? All these obstacles you have to overcome. Find creative solutions. See, we often talk about entrepreneurs are so persistent, right? They just don't give up. It's not just about persistence. It's about creative persistence. It's about finding creative solutions to get past all those barriers. I mean, when I joined Google, it was really early. They only had one product. It was search. They didn't even have Gmail. And when I joined, they said, we have this top secret project, Chris, called Project Whale. And what we're doing is we're going to make it so that you not only can you search the web, but you can also search books. So they were scanning all the books. But scanning books and turning pages is very laborious. So creative persistence. They built a device that automatically turned the pages of books so they could scan them at scale. That's creative persistence. Now, to start off with, I thought I need some co-founders, right? Some co-founders to start this company. So I got two co-founders originally. I got Philippe, who's in the top of the picture there. Philippe is from Belgium, and Philippe has the productivity of 10 superhumans. So he was a great co-founder. And then I got Dheeraj, and Dheeraj had grown up all over the world, and he had this like Zen Buddha-like quality to him that I knew would keep us grounded through the most stressful of times, and there were plenty of those. But there's one problem, which is that we're all useless, non-technical business people. We needed a genius technologist to invent this impossible algorithm, right? But again, remember, we've been talking to all these people, and they're all saying it's impossible, right? In fact, when we did find this fourth co-founder, this genius to invent the Shazam technology, he was writing notes on the whiteboard, and these are the actual notes of him inventing the algorithm for Shazam. I took a picture of it. And I don't understand any of them. Now, how are we going to pick this person, right? Because remember, like, everyone's saying it's impossible, including professors and PhDs from MIT, Stanford, Berkeley. And how are we going to pick this genius person? We needed to pick someone not just that had a PhD in electrical engineering, audio signal processing, but we needed the smartest one who just had a chance of maybe potentially inventing this technology for our startup, right? How are we going to do this? Well, as I interviewed all these people, I realized I didn't understand a word they're saying. So how am I going to pick the smartest one, right? How can I tell? And then I had an idea. I thought, I know. I'm not going to pick them. I'm going to get Professor Julia Smith from Stanford to pick them. So we made Professor Julia Smith from Stanford our first advisor to Shazam. Professor Julia Smith from Stanford, he taught electrical engineering within the department called Center for Computer Research in Music and Acoustics. Professor Julia Smith had invented the algorithms that are in every electronic keyboard in the world. Professor Julia Smith had previously been the head of audio technologies, reporting directly to Steve Jobs. Professor Julia Smith had been hired by the US military to detect submarines under the water using only sound. He was worldwide eminent in the field of music and acoustic signal processing. So we had this list of 30 names that we had collected from all across the internet, published papers in music and acoustic signal processing. And in our first meeting, I went and met with Julius in his living room at his home in Palo Alto, California. And I said to Julius, can you please rank the 5 smartest people on our list? These are the actual notes from that meeting. And the number 1 rank was someone named Avery Wang. Avery had done his PhD thesis under Julius. He had 4 degrees from Stanford in mathematics, audio signal processing, electrical engineering, computational neuroscience, and he joined as the 4th co-founder of Shazam. Now, you're probably thinking, why are they all saying it's so hard? Why are they saying it's impossible? I mean, you just push a button and it identifies a song. I mean, look at what ChatGPT does. It does way more than that, although it doesn't identify songs. And here's the reason. See, Shazam is pattern recognition, right? Like fingerprint recognition is pattern recognition, voice recognition, eyeball recognition. Those are all pattern recognition. Shazam is a form of pattern recognition. And in pattern recognition, when you combine two challenges at the same time, it often becomes impossible. And those two challenges are noise and scale, right? So imagine that you had noise, like people talking in the background of a bar, but your database of songs is only 10,000 songs. Okay, you might be able to invent that technology. Or you had no noise, like clean signals coming in from radio stations, but maybe a big database of tens of millions of songs, you might be able to make that work. But noise and scale at the same time, that's often when it becomes impossible. So for example, if I said to you, I want you to use your own brain to do pattern recognition, find Tom Cruise in this picture. So you look for Tom Cruise, all the other people represent the noise, right? Now do it here. That's noise and scale for your brain. Now, not only did we have to deal with noise, we had to deal with noise cancellation. That's technologies that were built into the mobile phones that emphasize the human voice and de-emphasize all other sounds, including music. Audio filtering, where they chop the top and the bottom of the spectrum off and only send over the portion of sound that carried human voice. Speed variation, where DJs at the time would play with vinyl records and they'd change the speed of one of the songs to match the beats. Pitch correction, if those DJs were using digital music like CDs, and then they could adjust the pitch as well, so both the speed and the pitch of a song. It's a nonlinear transformation of the music, so it doesn't start to sound like the Chipmunks when you speed it up. And reverberation, which is that kind of echoey effect you get in a large room. And sound distortion if the speakers are poor quality. And we had to make sure that what we invented would work through across all these things. So to give an example, I'm going to play for you 15 seconds of a song right now. And now I'm going to play that exact same 15 seconds of that exact same song as we recorded over a mobile phone in a bar. Now you can see why all these professors and PhDs are saying, we have no idea how to do this, right? And so we worked at it for months. And Avery, you know, my co-founder, the genius technologist, he couldn't figure out a way to do it. He couldn't think of a brand new way. There was no technology that could do it, no patents that were relevant. Even the radio recognition technologies simply wouldn't work in noise and scale. And you know, there were times he was going to say to me, you know, Chris, your startup idea, it's not going to work. I can't invent this. Until one day he was working in a cafe, Palo Alto, California, and he cracked the code. He came up with a novel invention, a brand new idea. It turned out to be the first AI in history that would become a mass consumer product. And what it was a three-dimensional graph, a graph of spectral peaks that are energy peaks of sound, graphed both against time, but also across frequencies. And then combinatorial hashing, a technique that even Google used for web search to turn it into a very fast search. That day, that breakthrough idea that Avery had, that occurred on this very same day that Coldplay released their very first song. An album that I listened to over and over and over and just love. Now, we had a unique invention. Of course, we filed a patent. And now we needed money. We needed to raise a lot of money. But the dot-com bubble had just popped, and it's like we were going to venture capitalists. We were based in London, by the way, mostly. Avery was in Palo Alto, but we were based in London. We were pitched to venture capital firm after venture capital firm after venture capital firm. Over 100 venture capital firms we went to, pitching this idea, and they just kept saying no, no, no. No one would invest. I can still remember one meeting in particular with a big, famous venture capital firm that probably many of you, if not all of you, have heard of, but I won't tell you who. And I showed the demo of Shazam to the partner, and he looked at it and he said, I don't see why anyone would ever use that. Yeah. And he didn't invest. But I thought, I've got to prove this guy wrong. I've got to prove him wrong. And so we did raise money. We raised $7.5 million, Series A venture round from 3 venture capital firms, one of them being Richard Branson. You probably have heard of Richard Branson's Virgin Group. So his venture capital firm was called Lynx Capital Partners. Now we had $7.5 million, and we could embark on building the business. And the first thing you need if you're going to build a music recognition business is the music. But at that time, there was no digital database of music. There was no Spotify. There was no Apple Music. There was no iTunes. No digital databases of music. Music was in the form of CDs. And we didn't have the CDs. We're a startup. What are we going to do? Buy one of every single CD, right? Creative persistence. So here's what we did. At that time, again, we were based in London. The 2 big record stores at the time in London on Oxford Street were HMV and Virgin Megastore. And so we went and we met with the executives of Virgin Megastore. And I said to them, our investor is Richard Branson. Can we have access to your CDs? And they said, no. And I'm like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So then we went, and there was this company that was an hour outside of London. It was a distributor, a warehouse of CDs. They would send the CDs into all the record stores across the United Kingdom. And we met with the executives of that company. I remember they had these grizzly gray beards. And we said to them, the world is changing. The world is going to digital. Wouldn't it be great to have one digital copy of all that music? Because we can build it for you for free. Creative persistence. And if you're thinking what I'm thinking, the next thing you know, we had a partnership without paying a single dollar. A partnership where we co-located at their warehouse, and we hired 30 18-year-old kids who worked in 3 8-hour shifts, 24 hours a day, going to the racks, pulling the CDs off the racks, taking them over to computers that ran custom software that we built from scratch, putting the CDs into the computers, and then as we took the music off the CDs, they had to type the name of every song, every artist, and every album title, because that information does not sit on the CD for 9 months. Creative persistence, right? Now, when I first came up with the idea for Shazam, I was like, wow, I am going to start a music recognition business. But I'm not sure I realized that really what I was starting was a search engine. Not a search engine of the web, but a search engine of music. Because every time someone identifies a song, we capture a few seconds of sound, and then we fingerprint it, and then we compare it against the fingerprints of every single song, every second of every single song, and we do that all in just milliseconds. And we knew there was this other startup that started just a couple years before us called Google, and they had built a search engine. And they had actually pioneered a new model, because there was no Amazon Web Services at the time, a new model called a Beowulf cluster, which is basically buying a bunch of commoditized PC computers, wiring them all together, and then writing custom software to turn them into one giant supercomputer, one giant search engine. And so we even got a little tour of their little data center at the time, and we thought to ourselves, you know what? We're going to do the same thing. So we also bought a whole bunch of PC computers and wired them all together and hired rocket smart engineers to write custom software to turn them into one giant Beowulf cluster supercomputer search engine. Now, it is true that Google became a much more successful company than Shazam. But whose search engine do you think is better looking? That's the spring of 2002. So think about where we were at the time. We were 1 year ahead of the iPod, right? Let alone iTunes, which came after that. I mean, there was no market for digital music. People didn't buy digital songs. We were 7 years ahead of the iPhone, right? So we had this beautiful, colorful PowerPoint presentation that we would show all the venture capitalists, that would show all the things we anticipated Shazam doing as mobile phones evolved, but we had no idea how far away we were from being able to do it. After you identify the song, you'll get a nice colorful picture of the album cover. We couldn't do that. Then you'll be able to download the song to your phone. We couldn't do that. Then you'll be able to read the lyrics of the song. We couldn't do that. Then you'll be able to share it with a friend. There was no Twitter or Facebook. Then you'll be able to add it to a playlist. There was no Spotify or Apple Music, right? We couldn't do any of these things. So the way Shazam launched in the summer of 2002 was as a telephone number. This is in the United Kingdom. We secured a 4-digit number by partnering with all 4 of the mobile operators. So you can think of it as like a bit like 911 or 411, a short code that you dialed this number. It was the only 4 digits on a mobile phone keypad that were in a straight line, 2580, straight down the middle. You dialed 2580, it initiated a voice phone call into our interactive voice response system, IVR, which answered the phone and said, "Hold your phone to the music." You held your phone up in the air. We recorded 15 seconds of sound. We terminated the phone call, but we had your caller ID. And so a second later, we sent you a text message with the name of the song. And that was Shazam. Crazy, huh? That was the summer of 2002.
Oh, baby. Oh, baby. Then it fell apart.
Creative persistence. It's all about when you have a big new idea, all these obstacles and barriers that you come across. There's something that everyone here does, including me, which is that sometimes we have some big new revolutionary thing we want to do, and then when we encounter an obstacle, we respect it like an authority, and we say, "Oh, can't be done." But instead you have to defy those barriers and find creative new ways to get past them, new ways to get around them. Okay, now, in our lives, in our personal lives, and in our professional lives, in both personal and professional lives, we all encounter problems. Everyone here does, right? Sometimes those problems are little problems, and sometimes those problems are big problems. And when they're big problems, I compare them to being like a boulder. But can you always spot a boulder coming at you? Okay, you're probably thinking, where's he going with this whole pebble boulder thing, right? So, see, what it is that there's something that every entrepreneur and every executive at every company, that everyone believes, which is that we need to make things simple. We need to eliminate friction, right? And when the whole world looks at Apple, we all go, look at Apple, such a successful company, commands huge margins, so valuable. How do they do it? They make things simple. They make things delightful. They eliminate friction. We all know it's the secret sauce. But I was thinking to myself, given that's true, then why is it that there's still so much friction in the world? I'll give you an example. My son, he loves Minecraft, and I just wanted to update the email address that he uses for his Minecraft account. You do that on Microsoft.com because they own Minecraft. And I still haven't succeeded. That's how hard it is. And why? Why are these things so hard? Well, I came up with the answer, and I'm going to share that with you right now. This is the answer. See, what happens is that when you have your business and your product that you're thinking through, you sometimes see a little piece of friction, like, oh, the user just has to click here. The user just has to, register with the email they get. Whatever it is, just some little thing. It looks really small, and you think, it's just a pebble. But actually, it's a boulder. We think it's a pebble, but actually it's a boulder. And I'll give you an example of what I mean in a second. But this is what I think of as being friction. Anything that someone has to think and anything that someone has to do. So imagine that you had to renew your passport online, okay? That's all you want to do, renew your passport. So you go log in on the website and it says, enter your known traveler number. Oh, what is my known traveler number? I don't even know, national identity number. What? You have to know something, that's friction. Send us a new picture of yourself, and when you do, make sure you leave a 1/4 inch to the left of your head, a 1/4 inch to the right of your head, a 1/2 inch above your head, and a white background, or reject the picture. You have to learn something. That's friction. Do you want the regular passport renewal service or the expedited passport renewal service? You have to choose something. That's friction. Your passport would be ready, processed in 4 to 12 weeks. 4 to 12 weeks, you have to interpret something. That's friction. Don't worry, your passport might be ready in time for your international flight. Might be ready? I need it for that international flight, right? Concern is friction. Initiate the process here, register here, input the last 3 home addresses, wait this number of weeks. And if you want to check the status, you can always log in the website to check the status. Monitoring is friction. See, what we need to do is we need to reduce effort for others, not for ourselves. And sometimes you have to move mountains to eliminate friction, and even though it might look small, like a pebble, could actually be like a boulder. Now, when I really learned this is when I joined Dropbox, right? And then at this point, I'm still on the board of Shazam. It's still going through years of trying to make it. And I joined Dropbox. It was about a 90-person startup. And when I joined Dropbox, they told me this story. It was founded by these 2 engineers out of MIT, and they had invented these technologies. And they said, Chris, we're actually not the first document cloud service. They were not the first one. In fact, there were many predecessors, many. In fact, there were 2 they talked about at the time that had raised millions of dollars in venture capital money called xDrive and iDrive, okay? xDrive and iDrive, they were almost identical to Dropbox, frankly. I mean, a piece of software you downloaded, installed on your computer, right? There was only really one difference with xDrive and iDrive from Dropbox, which is that with xDrive and iDrive, when you wanted to get your document in the cloud, you had 1 click, upload. And when you wanted your document back from the cloud, you had 1 click, download. And I guarantee you the founders of xDrive and iDrive and the venture capitalists that gave them millions of dollars were like, yeah, it's just 1 click, upload, download, that's it. It's just a pebble, and these are going to be huge successful companies. It's going to be amazing, but those companies got almost no users. They all went bankrupt. And Dropbox, the founders, they said, you know what, that 1 click, that's not a pebble, that's a boulder. And so they said, we're going to do 2 really hard technical things to solve that problem. We're going to hack into the file and folder system of every operating system, Mac OS, PC, Linux. We're going to hack into it all, and we're going to make it so there's a folder that looks just like all the other folders on your computer, but it's a magic folder, and it has a Dropbox icon on it. And if you put files into that folder, they're also in the cloud. There is no 1-click upload. There is no 1-click download. If they're in the folder, they're in the cloud. And then they realized, wait, but you might edit one of those documents. I mean, it could be PowerPoint or Excel. You might make a change. And so then they had to do an even harder technical thing, which was to build synchronization, so that every time you made a change to one of those documents, it would synchronize with the cloud to keep the same document synchronized with on your computer and in the cloud. That was an incredibly hard problem to do. So hard that even Google and Microsoft hadn't done it, because there's so many edge cases where synchronization can break down. You shut your laptop computer right when you're synchronizing a document, or the Wi-Fi goes out, and I'm sorry, but that interrupted the synchronization, and we corrupted your document, and you've lost all your work forever, right? Clearly not acceptable. So, they had to solve this and solve for every edge case and make sure that synchronization always worked across all file types. But they did it, and by doing it, now they had this magic folder that if your document was in the folder, it was in the cloud. There was no 1-click upload. There was no 1-click download. And I can still remember my first week at Dropbox. They said to me, Chris, our predecessors, xDrive and iDrive, had 1 click. We have 0 clicks. And the difference between 0 and 1 is infinite. I'll never forget that moment. The difference between 0 and 1 is infinite. And Dropbox was the first cloud service to rocket to hundreds of millions of users. Now, there's a part of the Shazam story that I left out. See, as we were coming up to the launch in that summer of 2002, I thought, wow, we've done everything. We've invented this algorithm that everyone said was impossible. We've built this music database from scratch with 30 18-year-olds working 24 hours a day for 9 months. We've built a search engine Beowulf cluster just like Google. We got a 2580 number on every mobile phone in the United Kingdom. This is going to be amazing. We're going to be a smashing success. And it didn't happen. We got barely any users. Has anyone here ever had a really bad year? Yeah. How about 2? Because we had 6. 6 years. 6 years of almost no users. 6 years of burning through cash, barely surviving, trying to think how to make it, struggling, looking for alternative forms of revenue. 6 consecutive years. You know why it was 6 years? Because that's how long it was from when we launched in the summer of 2002 until when the iPhone App Store came out in 2008. 6 years. And you know what? It's all due to friction. I mean, think of all the friction we had, right? You had to know something 2580. You don't have to know anything with an app. It's just on your phone. And then if you wanted that song after you Shazammed it back then, you couldn't just download it from iTunes on your phone or add it to a playlist. You had to get in your car, drive to the record store, show it to the person and say, I'd like to buy that CD. Talk about friction, right? And then we needed a way to make money, a business model, so we charged people on their mobile phone bill 50 cents every time they Shazammed a song, and we shared that with a mobile phone company. But if you charge people 50 cents every time they Shazam a song, that is friction. And it's not until the App Store came out and enabled us to eliminate all that friction that we suddenly, finally, after years of barely surviving, started to rocket into the hundreds of millions of users. So where in your startup idea can you think of some piece of friction, something that you think often looks just like a pebble, but might actually be a boulder? How can you create like a Shazam button-like experience where someone just pushes a button and gets exactly what they want? How can you find that piece of friction for your new idea? Eliminating friction is defiance. Of course, you're defying effort, right? You're looking end to end in an experience from the beginning all the way through to the end of the experience, looking for that little pebble that might actually be a boulder and then moving mountains to remove it. Okay, now imagine that you inherit a small plot of land, okay, a little small plot of land out in the countryside. And you think, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build my dream house. How is it going to be different building your dream house? Well, obviously, if it's your own house, you're really going to care about every little detail, right? I mean, your own dream house. You're not just building a house, you're building a home. You're going to be like, oh, I want like skylights and windows right in that part of the kitchen so that sun rays come down exactly where I make coffee in the morning. And I want that one doorknob on the front door that's so easy to lock, but also really easy to unlock. And I want those rustic hardwood floors that are so rustic and cool, but really easy to clean. You're going to care about every little detail because you're personally connected, you're emotionally connected to what you're creating. And we, the founders of Shazam, were emotionally connected, personally connected to creating something amazing, as were all the employees that we hired for Shazam. We cared about the name, the color, the touch, the feel, the speed, the features. We cared about everything so much. But something really scary happened. Giant corporations copied our technology and competed directly against us, and I thought they were going to make us irrelevant. Philips created a technology and then offered to license it to any company in the world that was willing to build their own music database and their own search engine to compete against us. Luckily, no one was for years, until Sony bought that Philips technology and did build an end-to-end service and put their Shazam competitor, preloaded it onto every Sony Ericsson phone in the world. That's tens of millions of phones. And then Google, literally, while I'm on the board of Shazam working at Google, of course, Google goes and builds their own music recognition and puts it right into the Google search app on every Android and every iPhone that they're on, right as prominent as Gemini. And I thought, you know what? These companies are going to make us irrelevant. But you know what? Shazam ended up with 90% market share of music recognition around the world. And why? Because we were connected to our emotions. We were so personally connected to what we were creating. We created like synchronized lyrics so that after you Shazam a song, you can see the lyrics synchronized on your mobile phone with the ambient music that you hear in that environment. Offline Shazam, so you can Shazam a song up in an airplane or down in a nightclub where there's no connectivity, and you'll get the result when you get back to connectivity. Auto Shazam, where you can hold the Shazam button down and it turns it on all night long, so you get a playlist from that wedding you just attended. Concerts and charts that are localized to where you Shazam songs. Super fast, making sure every part of the experience was super, super fast. And then the hardest one of all, the music coverage, getting all the Japanese music, the Korean music, the Brazilian music, the DJ music, even that song that someone in Hollywood placed onto the next episode of Grey's Anatomy. And because we did all that, when we launched as an app in 2008 with the very first app store, we were one of the first 500 apps that launched on that day, people love Shazam. We got such high ratings, even compared to the apps that are made by giant corporations with enormous resources and huge brands. People love the Shazam app. And then Apple did something. They did it actually 1 year after the App Store launched. 1 year after the App Store launched, they did something that they very rarely do. They made a public announcement. They said, we are going to announce the most popular apps in the App Store. There was Google, there was Facebook, there was Skype, and there was little old Shazam. Now, I don't know if anyone here would do this, but I did. I went to my computer and I thought, what was the name of that venture capitalist again? Gosh. I dug up his name from years ago, and I sent him an email, and I said, it turns out people will use this. That was the summer of 2009. Yeah. Connecting to emotions. You know, it's about having impact, It's actually really easy to do with it. Whatever your company is. All you have to do is think about the work you do. Think about the work that you do. Think about how it impacts other people in their lives. And then feel the impact of what you do. Now, in the case of Shazam, I love the idea that every single month, over 300 million people are Shazamming songs, finding a piece of music to bring into their life. That's so exciting for me. But what's really interesting is that on the other side of that, there's a struggling music artist who's hoping to get discovered, such as in this story.
And I wrote down on January 3rd, of like intentions and goals for the new year, like things to do, and one of them was to look for a new career. And the next day, I got a phone call from my managers, and they told me, and I
wanna go down. I wanna go down swinging. I wanna go down hard with all of my heart. I wanna go down.
Thad rose to the top of the charts, and he still makes albums today. Connecting to emotions, right? It's about making it personal. It's about feeling the impact of what you do. So when I show you this old 1997 television commercial for Apple, ask yourself, how did these people impact the world?
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. So think how you can defy your own brain by questioning all those assumptions, and when you want to come up with a big new idea and build from the basic truths. And how you can then defy all the barriers when you have some big new thing you're trying to do. There's going to be so many obstacles and barriers that it's going to feel like the system was set up to stop you, almost like a prison. But come up with creative ways to get past all those barriers with creative persistence. And then how you can defy effort. Defy effort by looking end to end in an experience for little bits of effort that look like a pebble but might actually be a boulder, so you can eliminate friction. And how do you do all these things that are really hard that we don't do by default? You make it personal. You connect to emotions. Now, when people hear the Shazam story, one common question I get is they say to me, Chris, did you ever want to give up? I mean, it was 18 years from starting the company until it finally was acquired by Apple. 6 years of almost going bankrupt. $140 million of venture capital funds raised. Did you ever want to give up? And I always think about it, and I think to myself, no, I never wanted to give up. Because I was so personally connected, so connected to my emotions. I always thought, I just know another year, another couple of years, we're going to get there. One day there's going to be millions of people using Shazam around the world. So I'd like to show you 1 minute of this concert. And as you watch this 1 minute of this concert, notice the emotions in the audience. And think how you can use your own emotions to overcome the obstacles in your life. So the most rewarding moment of Shazam, for me, was actually not the day that we invented this algorithm that everyone told us was impossible. And the most rewarding moment of Shazam for me was not even the day 18 years later when Apple acquired Shazam. When every venture capitalist told me, Chris, Apple just doesn't make big acquisitions. The most rewarding moment of Shazam for me was actually not that long ago when I was in my hometown in San Francisco in a little grocery store called Buy Right, and I was waiting in line to buy my groceries. And then suddenly the person standing in front of me said to the cashier, they said, hey, what's that song? And the cashier said, I don't know, let's Shazam it. And then these two people who are complete strangers start Shazamming a song together right in front of me, just inches away. And I didn't say anything, but I thought to myself, wow, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I think we might have a couple minutes or for some questions. So happy to answer some questions.
Okay, I got a couple of questions, but first, did you ever have troubles with licensing the songs?
Great
Like,
question.
because I know music business may be a little bit hard, and I know, for example, when Spotify started, they had a lot of trouble with licensing. Do you guys ever had that problem?
Great question, really good question. It was actually one of the things. I'm actually now writing a book about the story, and it's going to be almost a chapter on that. But we were really worried about that because the hardest part about that is that the record labels are used to getting whatever they want because they control the music rights, and so they ask for a lot. And Spotify will tell you the same thing. Spotify had to pay hundreds of millions of dollars in guarantees as part of their license deals with all the record labels. And we were worried that we would have to pay huge amounts of money to get licenses. So we hired lawyers early on when we were a startup, specifically music and copyright attorneys, trademark attorneys that specialized in music. And we got a legal opinion. And fortunately for us, the legal opinion was that identifying a song, which you do from a fingerprint, is not a licensable act. Because it turns out a licensable act is when there's some part of music that you can recognize. So if I say da-na-na-na, that's licensable. But identifying a song, which is just a mathematical description of music, and there is no hearing music, you're not downloading the music, you're not hearing the music, you're just identifying it, is not a licensable act, thankfully. So we didn't need licenses. The record labels did all threaten us, of course, and say we had to pay them a lot of money or they might sue us. But then none of them actually followed through to sue us because they realized that their own lawyers gave them the same advice. And in fact, years later, all the major record labels put money into Shazam.
I had a question for you. Thank you so much for being here today. I really enjoyed your presentation. It was at that next level. So thank you for that. My question is, for those of us in the audience who don't know how to do this, how do you get Apple to buy your stuff?
How do you get Apple to buy your company?
Buy your Shazam, for example.
Oh yeah, that's a great question, yeah. I guess there's sort of two answers to that. There's the process answer, and then there's the reason Apple bought Shazam. The process answer is that when you're ready for an acquisition, and acquisitions can happen without you predicting them, where someone approaches you, or they can happen where you go out and you try to sell the company. For us, it was going out and selling the company. So we hired Goldman Sachs, and then Goldman Sachs kind of spent a year preparing a deck that told the story of what Shazam is, why it's valuable, and then we took it out to the big decision makers at companies, all the obvious companies, right? Google, Amazon, Facebook, Spotify, Apple, and so on. So that's the process aspect of it, and in the end, Apple was the one that wanted it the most. And then there's the strategic reason. Why did Apple buy Shazam? Well, what's amazing about Apple is that back in the day, they were the innovator of digital music, right, with iTunes. And when they had iTunes for years, it was 90% of the digital music market, and they got disrupted by Spotify. So Spotify introduced streaming music, and a whole different model, right, where you rent access to music rather than owning music, and can access it from many different places. And Spotify, even to this day, has the dominant market share, so Apple got disrupted. They quickly, a few years later, they bought a company and followed and sort of have their own Spotify competitor, Apple Music. And it turns out in a world where you have all the music you could want for $10 a month, your new problem is no longer what music do you own, because you kind of have access to all of it. And your new problem is discovery. What do you want to listen to? And in that world, Shazam is great, because Shazam is about discovery. And in fact, Shazam is a huge flow of people. About 8 million people download Shazam every month. As I mentioned, over 2 billion downloads, over 300 million monthly active users. And those are all people just getting the app for free. So it was a great funnel for Apple Music, and it's been very successful for them as a way to get more subscribers to Apple Music, as well as complement the Apple Music experience. So there's your answer.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hey Chris, I'm Tara. I'm a master's data science student. It honestly feels like a dream. I'm really inspired by your work. I actually built an app called Cypher. Think Shazam, but for movies. So instead of acoustic fingerprinting, it uses semantic matching of embeddings of the audio clip transcription with subtitled embeddings of movie in my database, and returns the movie in seconds. So my question would be Cypher does have a lot of limitations now, and I'm assuming you had a lot of limitations with Shazam when you started back then because the technology wasn't advanced. So what was the process like? How do you know when you have to engineer something, or just wait for the time to catch up?
How do you know when you have to engineer?
Engineer order or wait for the time to catch up. How do you know when to choose? This is the time that I have to figure out something for this, or no, I have to wait for the time to catch up, technology to catch up.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think almost everything in entrepreneurship is judgment, I think that when something's really strategic to your business and a differentiator, and you think you have the ability to innovate and create a new technology, then I think it does make sense, absolutely, to really go all in and try to build your own solution, even if it hasn't been done before. But then there might be some other things that just, we couldn't have created the App Store, right, which is what ultimately saved us. So, but we couldn't have said, oh, we're having this problem, people are not using Shazam, let's create an App Store and an iPhone for the world. So clearly that was beyond our capabilities. So sometimes you do end up being sort of having to sort of wait for the world to catch up to you, or YouTube in its early days, it had to wait for it, or it only became successful because a new technology was enabled, like automatic video play on websites and so on. So yeah, some things can be out of your control because they're sort of platform evolutionary plays, but some things can be innovations that you can tackle yourself. So it definitely comes to judgment as to which one it is.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Hi, I had two questions. The first one pertains to how you balanced product development and business strategy in the early stages. And also, how did you train yourself to recognize opportunities that others usually overlooked?
Okay, so the first, I'm going to have my ADHD and dyslexia, I'm going to lose track. So
okay.
the first one is how I balance product development and
business strategy.
Business strategy.
Yeah.
I think that my approach has always been I'm a product-oriented person at heart. I mean, I like to, so I think sometimes, and especially in the early parts of a product, the most important thing is to get the product right. And so you might just think at a high level, is there a business there, but not really spend a lot of time on the nuances of the business. And so that was the case of Shazam. I mean, at a high level, I kind of thought to myself, well, if people are identifying songs, I definitely thought of it as more than just a feature. I thought of it as an entry point into music that connected with you and your life. And then from that entry point, just like a Google search, you're now connected with a song, and that would be the entry point to do many things with that song. So like read the lyrics, download the song, add it to a playlist, buy the CD, share it with a friend, all these things. So that was like the product experience. But the actual business model, I kind of thought at a high level, well, if we're doing that, there'll be money to be made selling music or, as you heard, charging mobile phones, advertising. We had all these things in our presentation. We anticipated all kinds of things, but, it took years to actually do them. So yeah, and I saw when I was at Google, we often did the same thing. I remember I was at Google and I was good friends with the leader, the product manager who launched the very first Google Maps. And when Google Maps was launched, he's still a good friend of mine today, but when the very first Google Maps launched, they kind of had no idea how they were going to make money about it. They just thought, we'll just make an amazing product, and once we have hundreds of millions of people using Google Maps, then we'll layer in some kind of highly localized advertising that becomes the business model. But that was at a high level, they just thought, that's what we'll do, but they didn't kind of dig into all the details. So I do think getting the product right is the most important part in that. And the second part of the question?
Is how you trained yourself to recognize opportunities that others you thought overlooked.
Were overlooked, yeah. I still do that today. I think it's I don't know if I trained myself, but it sounds like doing 20 push-ups a day or something, but I do think of it as a way of thinking, and I highly encourage that for anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur. Probably the single most important thing you can do, because basically, if you do things that other people can see the opportunity, well, they have lots of resources. It's going to be hard to compete against big companies that will do the same thing. It's when you do the thing that's not obvious, and there's even a name for this. Actually, one famous venture capitalist named Andy Ratcliffe, who's at Benchmark, calls it the non-consensus insight. It's basically there's even a quadrant, and in the quadrant you have a good idea or bad idea, and then sort of consensus or non-consensus. So everyone thinks that having better batteries in cars that is a good idea, but everyone thinks that, so that's not unique to you. Of course, a bad idea in general is just a bad idea. But if you have a good idea that is not consensus, so most people don't see it, and Peter Thiel calls that the truth that you know that others don't, then you're really onto something. I always love the great example of Airbnb, because just think, they were going to all these venture capitalists going, yeah, we have this idea. You're gonna rent a room in your house to a stranger. And the VCs said to them, go away. And literally, go away. I mean, they rejected him. Most of them rejected him. And then you're going to go and you're going to stay in a stranger's house. And anyway, but they saw the thing that other people didn't see, and they saw that it could be solved through an incredibly robust and granular trust system and ranking system. And they eventually solved it and created a huge market. So the non-consensus insight, and whatever your ideas are, I really encourage you to think about, is it something that you see that other people don't, but you do believe it to be true? And sometimes that comes from having worked in that space or being an expert in it or just thinking a lot about it. And that's, I think, the root kernel of what makes for a good idea for entrepreneurs.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks, Chris, for that inspiring story. It was really incredible. You know you've really made it when Shazam is not only a noun, but it becomes a verb, right?
Yeah, that's definitely very, very rewarding. Yeah.
Well, we really appreciate you being here. This concludes our keynote event. But please join us in Fireside Lounge across the hallway for a meet and greet lunch reception with Chris. Let's give Chris another round of applause.
Thanks so much. Yeah, and if you have other questions, I'll be at this meet and greet, so I can answer more questions. It looks like there were a lot of questions out there, which is great. Thank you so much.
That's great.